the Amber Alert Podcast.
Welcome back, Amber Alert Podcast. This is episode 96, part 2. I am your host, Amber Sturkey. It is a great day to be alive. I'm having a hard time here because this looks small, and I don't appreciate that because I'm not going to be able to read. Okay, don't want that either. All right, there we are, back to normal. So, as I mentioned at the end of part 1, just a little while ago, this will be relatively short. Now, this is a conspiracy theory. I personally think it's true. If you look this up on Google or any mainstream, search engine who's in bed with every aspect of our culture, they're all in bed together. That's why I don't understand how if you're the left, you can complain about the flow of information. Your side controls every aspect of our culture. You guys have Hollywood, you guys have the media, you guys have the educational institutions, you guys have, I know you don't have the administration right now, but you've got a lot of the government, if not most of it. So, what are you talking about? You've got Google, you've got Apple, you've got Amazon, you've got everything that's big. It's all left. So you can't trust that if the left, if the powers that be want something covered up, it's going to be covered up, which is why when we get to talking about giant human bones and those kinds of findings, all of that has happened, but it's been whisked away by the Smithsonian, and you have one side that's in control of the flow of information, and they have a narrative. And if something does not go along with the narrative, it just gets silenced and pushed away. And it gets labeled a conspiracy theory that isn't true. So this that I'm going to get into is a conspiracy theory. I personally think it's true. And it's back in the news, sort of. This is not a new thing, but it's sort of back in the news because the mention of it popped up in a Hillary Clinton email. So what it is, it's the subject of the tomb of Gilgamesh, and it has everything to do with the Iraq war. So I have a couple videos. There's a girl I follow. Her name is Ashley Hayes. I'm going to let her talk. She's going to do a better job than I could, but I'll give you a very brief introduction and then we'll get into her videos. This part of the episode will not be long because the videos aren't that long. So here's the first introduction. So who was Gilgamesh? He was a legendary king of Uruk in ancient Mesopotamia, modern day Iraq, and the central figure of the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest surviving works of literature in the world, written around 2100 to 1200 BC. Now here's where it gets interesting. Was he a real person? Most scholars think there probably was a real king Gilgamesh around 2700 BC, but the stories about him, they're epic, mythic, and definitely larger than life. This is starting to sound familiar. So what is he famous for? Being part God, part man. He's described as 2/3 divine and 1/3 human. Strong, proud, intense, basically ancient Mesopotamia's superhero king. So I could go on, but for those of you who are students of the Bible, that sounds very eerily similar to the description given us in Genesis 6 about the men of renown, which was the Nephilim. They were the mighty men. They were huge. They were giants. They were also half divine, half human, because they were the offspring of the fallen angels and the human women. And then boom, there you have a demigod, to put it in Marvel terms, right? So you have something that's massive, that's going to be a mighty person, and that's also not human. So that's what Gilgamesh was, in my opinion, was nothing more than a Nephilim. And again, as you read beyond Genesis 6 and you read throughout the Old Testament, there are tons of different giants, different tribes. They have different names that the Israelites encountered on their way to the promised land, and they were tasked with killing them. God was like, go destroy everybody. And so naturally that's quite a charge to be given. Imagine if you're a normal sized human and you're supposed to get to some place and there are giants in your way. be kind of disheartening. And yet God said, I've already given the land to you, just go take it. So that's where you have this whole divide that happened, where Joshua and Caleb, they brought back a report. Yes, there are giants in the land, but they're bread for us. We're going to go in and take the land. And then you had the other spies who were like, we can't. We look like grasshoppers to them. They devour. It's a land that devours its inhabitants, which is likely a reference to cannibalism, which matches the records of what Native Americans said, that there were giants here in the Americas and they were cannibalistic and terrible in every way. So back to Gilgamesh. I believe he was a real person. I believe it was a Nephilim. Documents of giants go beyond the Bible. And the funny thing about the Epic of Gilgamesh, which this mentioned, which is a literary work, it mentions a massive flood. So it matches the biblical account of the flood. And so so far everything tracks as real, in my opinion. Now, where the conspiracy comes in is, what did America have to do with it, and what did this have to do with the Iraq war? And that's where Miss Ashley Hayes is going to come in, and I'm going to play 2 videos from her, which again are short, but she's going to explain how this ties in with us and the Iraq war. So let's give it a listen.
We have quite literally been lied to. We have quite literally been lied to about everything. They have created this Truman Show type simulation to keep the general public distracted from the truth, distracted from the biblical events that are actually happening in our world. And one of these events is actually the war in Iraq. Everybody meet Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh was an ancient Sumerian king who ruled in what we now know is modern day Iraq. And he was a 17 to 20 foot giant. He was a demigod, which means he was half human and half god. Now, if you know your Bible, and if you followed my stories before on ancient Egyptian history and how we've been lied to, you know that these giants actually existed, and they were demonic human hybrids that ruled and ravaged the earth. Now, Gilgamesh was a barbaric king. He built up and ruled over the city of Uruk, which is, again, modern day Iraq. Now, you and I were taught that this is all just mythology, just like the ancient Egyptian half animal, half human gods that we read about. But when you read the Bible, you understand that this all, in fact, actually happened. So what does he have to do with the war in Iraq? This brings us to 2003, when German archaeologist Jörg Fassbinder was digging in modern-day Iraq, and he thought he found the city of Uruk.
Gilgamesh was simply a figment of myth. That was until Jörg Fassbinder and his team of archaeologists, using modern technology to look deep into the ground, discovered an entire ancient city beneath the desert, astonishingly laid out just as the city of Uruk, over which Gilgamesh had purportedly reigned, was described in the epic. There were houses and gardens and fields alongside an incredibly sophisticated system of canals, leading archaeologists to describe the site as Venice in the desert. More importantly, on the outskirts of the ancient city was what appeared to be a burial site, which archaeologists believed to be the tomb of the ancient king.
So Jörg goes to the authorities, tells them he thinks that he found the city of Uruk and possibly the tomb of Gilgamesh. And 5 months later, we invade Iraq. Now, here's where it gets crazy, because not only did we invade Iraq immediately after his findings, our military builds a base directly over the ruins. Anyway, it's not a secret that the USA established a base in the old Babylonian city, destroyed some historical artifacts, and also took with them many of the artifacts. They constructed buildings and helicopter landing pads in the ancient city. It's not a secret that they were searching for something very important.
Let me pause and say, actually, Candace Owens, I think, just talked about this the other day, which is probably the first truthful thing she said in a really long time. And I'm guessing maybe she talked about it because, again, this showed up in Hillary Clinton's emails very recently, which is why people are talking about it again. Obviously, this happened over 20 years ago when we went into, again, 2003. And I know a lot of people figured that was about oil, and that may have been part of it, but that wasn't all it was about. It just so happens that right after this guy, this German guy or whatever, goes and says, hey, I found what I think is the tomb of Gilgamesh. And then next thing you know, we're there. So, you can say it was about oil or whatever you want, but you got to understand that there are spiritual influences behind physical behavior. And so if you don't understand that, you're going to miss a whole lot. And I'll get into kind of what ancient sites, ancient gods, and all of this stuff, kind of tie it in before we end.
There were none. There were no weapons of mass.
And something's wrong. It's a whole world of deceit. We're going into Iraq to get artifacts, not to get anything but artifacts. That was the most important thing, they said.
But which artifacts?
I don't know. They just said artifacts. There were things in Iraq that were sold that we had to go get. Bush wanted those artifacts. It was very important.
Did we get them? And if so, where did they go?
We got them. They said they got everything they needed from that country.
Where is it?
I don't know. We have it.
Saddam Hussein was building a massive reconstruction of Babylon near the ancient city. Was he trying to hide something huge? Is that why the U.S. decided to invade Iraq so fast and acquire the ancient relic? Everything in our world is biblical. Everything.
I agree.
All of the wars that are fought are biblical. It goes back to the Bible. It goes back to the demonic forces that are still alive today, the evidence of the demonic forces that are all around our world that they don't want you and I to know about. And if you go on the Department of State's website and type in Gilgamesh, you are actually brought to the formal request for the ancient tomb of Gilgamesh. They were requesting his body from the burial site. So when we invaded Iraq, we went in and just took it all, and we actually had to return it. There's even an email from WikiLeaks that says requesting documents pertaining to the resurrection chamber of Gilgamesh, the location of his body, and the location of the buried Nephilim. Our entire world is biblical. All over our world is evidence of the Bible, evidence of the giants, evidence of the Nephilim, evidence of all these ancient civilizations that are written about in the Bible. But unfortunately, our world is controlled by Satan. Our government is ran by Satan. So what does our government do? It comes in and it covers it up.
So that's true. Also, part of it, not that I'm giving America a pass here, but it is possible to. Saddam Hussein was obviously evil. He also thought he was like Nebuchadnezzar, and he was doing the whole thing with the bricks, putting his name on them or whatever, starting to try to resurrect, tap into something ancient in that, because Iraq is Babylon, that location. So I'm not giving America a pass because I know there are obviously satanic players very high up in our own government and military. But on the other hand, is there a chance part of that was to keep it out of the hands of Saddam Hussein? That's possible. So that is, makes you wonder, why would someone in the military, like that guy said, why were we tasked with going in and getting artifacts? Why would the military, why would the U.S. government want artifacts? Well, they're not just any artifacts. There's something to them that was obviously part of a power source, a powerhouse of a city. Babylon was, in its heyday, those hanging gardens, it was like a wonder of the world. The wall was so thick around the city, you could have like 6 to 8 chariots side by side that could, drive around it. It was really something. And so it was also people who were in the occult. If you were to ask them, where did these occult practices, what is the source or the origin of the occult practices? And all of them go back to ancient Babylon. So it was a hub for all kinds of evil, and there's a power source tied to that. So when it comes to getting artifacts, what do you think people want them for? Again, yeah, maybe you don't want someone like Saddam Hussein having them, but also, what do you want them for? And if you would put it past our own government to go after the same thing Saddam Hussein was after, think again. So there's that. And then there might be something about, if you're trying to get the body of a Nephilim, that might point to something completely different. Like, I don't want to get ahead of myself. I'm going to play her other video and then I'll come back and talk, because there's a second one. And I'll wrap it up with my thoughts.
Reason that we invaded.
But
Welcome to part 2 of the real reason that we invaded Iraq, because you and I have been lied to our entire lives. In part 1, we talked about how an archaeologist discovered the ancient city of Uruk in modern-day Iraq, and then he discovered the tomb of Gilgamesh, and coincidentally, a few months after, we invaded Iraq. Well, buckle up, because this goes so much deeper than just his tomb. Now, for this video, we have to go back to the days immediately following the flood, and this brings us to Genesis 10. Genesis 10 is the genealogy of Noah. Genesis 10:1 tells us that the 3 sons of Noah were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Down, it says Ham had Cush, and then Cush had Nimrod. So Nimrod in the Bible is Noah's great-grandson. Now, why am I talking about Nimrod? Because Nimrod is Gilgamesh. In the Bible, we learn that Nimrod established a very large kingdom. He was essentially the first king of the world, and it also says that he ruled over all of the other sons of Noah. Now, because of this, there were many different peoples that would write about Nimrod. It was their personal account of who Nimrod was. The Babylonians wrote about him, the Assyrians wrote about him, the Hittites wrote about him. It says even in Palestine, tablets have been found with this man's name on them. He was obviously the most popular hero in the ancient Near East. And of course, the Sumerians wrote about him in the Epic of Gilgamesh. I'm going to go back to Genesis 10 to find out about Nimrod's kingdom. This is Genesis 10:8. And it says up at the top, he began to be a mighty one on the earth. We'll go back to that verse later. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Therefore, it is said, like Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. Verse 10. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh in the land of Shinar. That's southern Mesopotamia. From that land, he went to Assyria and built Nineveh, and there's more. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce them. Let's bring that verse to life a little bit. Here is a visual of Nimrod's kingdom. Down here, we have the Tower of Babel. We have Uruk, where he was found, or Erech in the Bible. The city of Ur, which is actually where Abraham was born, and then the land of Shinar. So pretty large kingdom. We're going to go back to Genesis 10:8 because it says he began to be a mighty one on the earth. This is the exact same phrase that God uses when he describes the giants in Genesis 6. So it says there were giants on the earth in those days and also afterwards. So God is specifically telling us that the giants, these demonic hybrid beings, survived the flood. When the sons of God came into the daughters of man and they bore children to them.
I would push back on that and say I wouldn't say that they survived the flood. I would say there was a second incursion after the flood. If you're going to say they survived the flood, then that means that Noah's family carried Nephilim DNA or blood. That they were corrupted. I disagree because it says Noah was pure. And it obviously doesn't say that necessarily about his sons, his wife, or his sons' wives. But I think that if the Nephilim got onto the ark, that defeats the purpose of the flood. So I don't think God would have missed that. I think that there was just a second incursion. If they could fall, if they could corrupt humanity before the flood, all they had to do was come down again and do it again after the flood. All you need is a female human to make it happen. So I wouldn't say they survived. I think the flood was successful in wiping them out, and there was just a second incursion. If a theologian can push back and correct me, I'm all for it.
Those were mighty men who were of old men of renown. The Greek origin of the words describing Nimrod are exactly the same as the Greek origin of the words God used to describe the giants in Genesis 6. It is worth mentioning that the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Old Testament, also says that Nimrod began to be a giant upon the earth. Now, Nimrod is talked a lot about in the book of Jasher, in the Apocrypha. And before anybody comes for me and says that we shouldn't read the Apocrypha, this is in the Bible, Joshua 10. Is it not written in the book of Jasher? 2 Samuel 1. Indeed, it is written in.
Here's the thing. I agree here because she's saying people say, well, it's not that's not the book of Jasher is not canonized, the book of Enoch is not canonized. I agree. So I wouldn't look at them as inspired scripture. But if they are mentioned or referenced in the Bible, then I think you can look at them as trustworthy, a trustworthy literary work, a written account that you can trust to reference. Don't look at it as scripture. I'm not going to live by what's in those books, but I think that they're detailed and they are definitely useful. If you're going to research this stuff, take them seriously as a written account of something that happened. Otherwise, I don't think the Bible would reference something that isn't real or that can't be trusted. It's not true.
In the book of Jasher, the authors of the Bible are referring us to other additional sources so we can find out additional information.
I agree.
Back to Jasher, it says, and they brought him offerings, and he became their lord and king, and they all dwelt with him in the city of Shinar, and Nimrod reigned over the earth and over all the sons of Noah, and they were all under his power and counsel. And all the earth was of one tongue, we know this, and words of union, but Nimrod did not go in the ways of the Lord. Here's what's interesting. He was more wicked than all the men that were before him from the days of the flood until those days. And when you read about Nimrod, this guy was disgusting. He was wicked. He was perverted. He mated with animals all the time because he couldn't control himself. He was absolutely deplorable. Now, Nimrod actually wore the garments that Adam and Eve wore in the Garden of Eden. They were passed down to Noah, who kept them on the ark, and then he passed them down to his sons, and then obviously his sons passed them down to Nimrod. And it says here, he gave them those garments through the love for him. And Nimrod grew up, and when he was 20 years old, he put on the garments. And Nimrod became strong when he put on the garments. And God gave him might and strength, and he was a mighty hunter in the earth. Yes, he was a mighty hunter in the field, and he hunted the animals, and he built altars, and he offered the animals on them before the Lord. Now, there is no written explanation for how Nimrod became Nephilim, how he became a demonic giant. So this is my personal conclusion based upon what I've read. We know that Nimrod, when he was ruling, he did not go in the ways of the Lord. He was more wicked than all the other men. But in his early life, he was obedient to the Lord. And when he put on the garments from Adam and Eve, God gave him power and might. So I think that all just got to his head. I think as he aged, he started to abandon the Lord and he started to serve Satan. And what does Satan do? He takes everything that is God's and he twists it in his own perverse and evil way. So I think as Nimrod started to serve Satan, Satan used that power that God had given him and somehow transformed him into this Nephilim, into this demonic giant and a completely wicked, horrible, grotesque man. Now, because he was Nephilim, he had access to Nephilim technology. And this is where we get into the conversation of the Stargate, which is a demonic portal. This is where it gets kind of crazy. And I know this is going to be a lot to take in for some people.
Let me just pause and say I've talked about stargates and portals in a previous episode. There's mention of at least one in Iraq. There's mention of other ones in other places, which, again, I know there's a movie about it. I know it's like sci-fi. I think it's a lot more than that. I think it's actually an access point where people who give themselves over to satanic things, they figure out this is an access point and you've got crossover between the physical and the spirit. And obviously this is not a good thing to be doing, but also the Stargate, and maybe she's going to get to it because I've not listened to this yet. That also might be part of the reason we were in Iraq. Hey, there's a portal there. There's a power source there. Something's coming in, something's going out. We need to get our hands on that. That's essentially what they're doing at CERN.
But y'all, the truth is that we live in a spiritual world. There are angels and demons all around us at all times. They're just in a different dimension than ours. So beings like Nimrod, who were almost 2/3 demon, had access to all of this demonic technology that was beyond what we could even imagine. Now, this brings us to the Ziggurat of Ur, which is located in modern day Iraq. Now, this is just an artist's depiction of what we think it might have looked like. This is what remains, and it was believed to have a Stargate buried underneath. This is pretty much what they look like. It's a portal to another dimension. And so all of the demonic rulers in the ancient civilizations, they had access to all this. They had this technology, and God tells us this in the Bible. And so when that archaeologist found the tomb, found the city of Uruk, that's a red alert for our government, because there's a lot of fallen angels that rule this world, and they are in power in our world. I'm not going to say any more than that. So when they got word of Gilgamesh or Nimrod, they knew what they were looking for. But who was in their way? Saddam Hussein, because Saddam actually thought that he was a reincarnated version of Nebuchadnezzar. In the 1980s, during the Iran-Iraq War, Saddam Hussein became obsessed with the Babylonian ruler Nebuchadnezzar. Saddam saw himself as a modern reincarnation of Nebuchadnezzar, and to prove it, he spent millions building a massive reconstruction of Babylon. In addition, he actually tried to reconstruct the ziggurat of Ur. So that means that he had the technology to the Stargate that was known to be below. Hussein either was able to get the Stargate working or learned something important from it, and Big Daddy America got concerned. The Bush administration recognized that Hussein had some very, very valuable, relevant information concerning the ancient history of the planet, either technology or text, basically confirming this, and he was going to release this to the public. I think that was a big part of the reason why the Bush administration went into Iraq, to stop him from revealing this information, and to also, of course, this is what I think, control it themselves. Now, all of this sounds crazy until you actually do some digging, and you find on the CIA's website a project called Stargate. Now, this goes back many, many years, because there are many Stargates all around the world. This document obviously is from 1993, and it covers the discussion of paranormal activity. The investigations described in this report involve a class of human capabilities generally referred to as parapsychological or paranormal phenomena. There are two general types: informational and energetic. There's a lot of weird stuff in this report, and it takes some time to read through, but you can find it yourself on CIA.gov. There's this story as well from 1928. You can find this on TikTok. This man was digging underneath Egyptian pyramids. He found a Stargate, went through it.
This, I think, is what I talked about when I did the episode on Stargates.
And he actually brought people with him. Time was different. So he thought he was gone for only like an hour, but he was gone for 3 days. So when he went through the Stargate or the portal, he actually went back in time to when the pyramids were being built. And he saw UFOs carrying the stones for the pyramids. He saw giants, he saw aliens, he saw Nephilim, he saw all of it. And he said it was beautiful and lush and green. And he actually saw conveyor belts. I mean, they had electricity, they had power, they had technology back then from demons. And there's many stories like this, actually. There's Stargates all over our world, because our world was inhabited by demons and demonic technology, and we have pyramids all over the world. And it is no coincidence that America, part of the Grand Canyon is closed off. A lot of national parks are closed off to the public, and it's a huge reason why we are lied to, because it goes back to the Bible. So we all know what a Stargate looks like, right? It's a portal. And we also know that our government went into Iraq and took the Stargate that was under the ziggurat of Ur. This is CERN.
Told ya. CERN has openly admitted. So I know it, like she said, it sounds crazy. It does. But if you just do a little bit of study, CERN has talked openly about how they're communicating with entities from other dimensions. And you can deny things as much as you want until you're comfortable, but how many coincidences do there need to be where something is uncovered and then all of a sudden the government comes in, or you've got blacked out SUVs that come in and then they're marking off the space, and it's hush hush, nobody goes in, nobody comes out, need to know basis, blah 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 blah. So back to what I was saying about the ancient things, and she's right that everything in our world is tied back to the Bible, which is why if you allow scripture to shape your worldview, you'll get the truth on things, you'll get answers, which is why she mentioned the pyramids. How can the pyramids be explained? Well, if you understand what happened in Genesis 6, and this is where the book of Enoch can come in and give a little more clarity, is because it's sort of a long version of Genesis 6. Now, there are parts of the book of Enoch that I don't think you can trust because they've been added later. I believe it's just Enoch 1 or 1 Enoch that is the original that was found with the Dead Sea Scrolls. And that book goes into detail that it wasn't just a sexual incursion. There was more to it than that. These fallen angels taught certain trades and things to human beings. And so they allowed this exchange. Hey, you give us access to your women, we'll give you access to things that we have. And boom, there you have technology that's above what human beings were capable of having at the time. And so there you can explain the pyramids, you can explain everything else on our planet that is unexplainable. There might even be things on Mars that, or who knows what. I'm sure as we keep getting closer, and I do think disclosure is on the doorstep, that I wouldn't be surprised if something is confirmed from Mars. And who knows what else may be in space or even potentially on another planet that's going to look like, hey, this was inhabited by, and there was a civilization here at one point, which is going to feed the alien narrative. You have, of course, just the things that people can see with their own eyes and catch with your phone, UFOs, all kind of stuff. You've had plenty of whistleblowers, like the kid who told his dad. This kid was in the military, and he told his dad that he was at a black site. He was underground, and he was working with aliens, is what he called them. He described them as aliens. And obviously wasn't supposed to tell his dad, but he did. And then his dad told L.A. Marzulli, who is a researcher of these things. So it's down there. It's underground. It's probably other places as well. But you can tie it back to the Bible. Why? Because that's where the occult, we see the occult roots. Like I said, Babylon, and you can go even further back than Babylon to when the Watchers corrupted humanity and taught certain things to them. So there is technology, and there is a power source that is not godly, and there are absolutely ties to ancient artifacts that have a remnant of that. And so if you know what you're doing, if you've been in communication with entities and with spirits, that they can tell you they're liars is the first thing you need to know. So they can tell you they can give you any name that they want. They can say they're anything. And the people messing with them, they may know what they're doing, they may not. But when you tap into this stuff, there's a power source there, and then people do God knows what with it, and there are nefarious plans. And when you get these, for example, when it comes to artifacts, there was a man in Georgia who he and his friend found like arrowheads and some other old artifacts, and so his friend took some home, and before you know it, he got sick. And it was a very strange sickness. The doctors did not have a name for it. They didn't know what was wrong with him. And he ended up dying. And he was a younger man. Like, definitely it was premature. And the other guy, his friend, I think he took a couple things home, but he realized as soon as he brought those items into his house, something felt not good. And he was like, I'm getting these out of my house. And when he did, the problem stopped. So there are people make fun of that. All those weird Christians who think there are demons attached to certain items. There are. And especially when you trace it all the way back to some Babylonian witchcraft or whatever, there are. So it's no wonder when you've got Saddam Hussein, who's already a lunatic, is messing around with this stuff. And who knows what his plans were. What, open this portal to hell, essentially, and get access to a power source, get access to a military might of some kind, who knows what, and then have my way, set myself up to be God. That could have been his plan. Nebuchadnezzar did that and then took a hit for it. And I know he came back around and God sort of used him. But if he thought he was Nebuchadnezzar, that's what led to Nebuchadnezzar ending up eating grass and having claw fingernails. Like, he took he took God's glory, and God doesn't like that. So I don't think it's a coincidence. The Iraq war, there might have been some oil. There might have been who knows what. I'm sure on paper there was an official explanation, although a lot of people didn't even really agree with it ever. But I bet you anything it was about more than just those surface level things. And so when you go back to the land where there's a dark history and there are still things there that could get you access to power, because a lot of people want power, but they don't want the power of God. They'll go to the occult, they'll go to satanic things. And I mean, naturally, that's what evil people are going to do. And they exalt themselves against God, which is what Satan did. So back to the DNA thing. If our military was actually after the body of Gilgamesh, why would that be? Why would you need the body of a giant? Assuming that's what he was. I'm thinking it was just a Nephilim, so naturally big. She mentioned 17 to 20 feet. That's the biggest one I've heard of. I think most of the giant skeletons that have been unearthed have been anywhere between even 7 feet tall, which could be human almost, but all the way up to like 13. I haven't heard of many much bigger than that. Some people have told stories of this was an 80-foot giant. I don't buy that. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm not aware of records that have shown that. Plus, if the Nephilim were born from a woman, a human being, you can only carry a baby so big before it kills you. How could a human being carry offspring that's going to turn out to be 80 feet tall or 100 feet tall? I think that would kill her 2 weeks into the pregnancy, so that doesn't work unless if you had Nephilim breeding with Nephilim, then they could get increasingly bigger. If you had, let's say you had a 13-foot male breed with a 10-foot female, then you might have a 20-foot offspring. And then if you kept doing that, they could maybe get bigger. But again, I just don't think that they've found skeletons that big. So I don't buy that. I know that people have also, we talked about dragons and dinosaurs, and there's this whole conspiracy out there, which I don't personally believe. I could be convinced if you can show me evidence, but I don't personally believe it. Not yet, at least. I do believe dragons were real. They were written about by, tons of different ancient cultures, and they were depicted as real. They weren't mythological creatures. So I think they were real. But a lot of people think the bones of dinosaurs, the skeletons of dinosaurs, are actually either dragon bones or they're bones of Nephilim that have been arranged to look like they were dinosaurs, as a way of covering up the truth of the giant bones. That I do think dinosaurs were real. I don't know how long ago, but I haven't seen anything convincing that they weren't real. Again, you could convince me if you can show me evidence. I'm just not there right now. And the thing is, if you want to cover up the giant bones, all you got to do is send them to the Smithsonian. They can burn them. They can dump them into the ocean, which there are rumors they've done that. You can dispose of things like bones. You really can. So it's not like they were like, oh, we have all these bones. What are we going to do with them? Let's make up dinosaurs and let's arrange them to make skeletons. To me, that seems... again, even the existence of dinosaurs doesn't disprove the Bible. So I feel like that would be a very dumb attempt and an elaborate attempt if you're just trying to disprove the Bible. I don't see how that could go anywhere for you, which is why I don't personally buy it. But anyway, DNA. So why would you want the body of a giant, of a Nephilim? It is possible that people like the ones at CERN or the powers that be are wanting here. Okay, here's a theory. So the Shroud of Turin, which I believe is real. If you don't know what that is, I did an episode on that too. It's been over a year ago, I'm sure. It's not a Catholic relic. It's called a Catholic relic by a lot of people just because the Catholic Church has been in possession of it forever, but it's not a Catholic relic. It's a linen cloth And I'll just pull up a picture of it in case people don't know what it is, so you don't think I'm making it up. So there's an image on this cloth, and it's been studied and it's been studied and it's been studied, and nobody knows what it is. They even brought in a what is she? A particle physicist. I think she died, but she was some little Italian lady or something. And she didn't know what it was. It's not a painting. I don't want to shop for one on Amazon. Okay. I just want to look at a picture. Let me see if I can put this up on my screen. So there's an image of a man on the Shroud of Turin, but this wasn't visible until, oh, gosh, it just won't let me make this very big. Well, if you can see it, this is like what it looks like, that middle image. And this wasn't visible until somebody saw a negative of it, and the guy almost dropped the plate when he saw that. That was back, whenever that came out. So they've done testing on it, and it has been. They've had to fix it. It got burned, I think, and so they've had to do some rework on it. So the thing is, somebody did testing on it, and it came back as, I think, like around. They're saying the origin of it is from like the 1500s or something like that, but they tested the part that had been redone because it got burned. So they didn't test it in another area, which would date it way back further than that. Plus, they've picked up samples of a certain kind of pollen that can only be traced back to Israel. So, and the thing is, there's also something called the, what's it called? The what of Oviedo. You've got the Shroud of Turin, and then I can't remember, something else called the something of Oviedo, which is sitting in Spain, which is like a head, a face cloth, which the Bible says there was a cloth around Jesus's face, and then there was one around his body, and there are over 120 points of congruency between this thing from Oviedo and the Shroud of Turin. And I promise I'm going to tie this back into Gilgamesh. Just bear with me. So I believe it's real. I think that when Jesus was resurrected, whatever kind of energy or power source was present when that happened, it created this image on the cloth. And it looks like a man who, looks much like how Jesus is depicted. And so I think the Shroud of Turin is real. Now, here's the thing. When it comes to DNA, there's a guy I know and respect, and I believe he's trustworthy. He thinks that the Shroud of Turin is a deception. Now, I think it's real. However, could it be used by the enemy in a deceptive manner? Yes, because let's say you're the Antichrist, right? And you rise to power and you want people to accept you as God. I wouldn't be surprised if there was blood taken from the shroud, which blood has been taken from the shroud. And the funny thing is there's no evidence of a father in the blood. And I couldn't tell you all the science behind that, but if you wanted to get DNA from it and then put that in yourself, that would be a convincing story. See, I am the God of, if you want to believe the Bible to some extent, I'm the God of that. I can be the God of this. I can be the God of this. Bow down and worship me. And then boom, there, it may have been something real, but you've used it as a deception. That's a theory. But when it comes to Gilgamesh, if you're after DNA, again, do you think Satan has just abandoned his plans? He corrupted humanity back in the book of Genesis. We're told in the book of Genesis, or in the book of Matthew, I believe it's chapter 24, where Jesus says, "As it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the coming of the Son of Man." There's a similarity of behavior there. Well, there was DNA involved in the creation of the Nephilim then. So if you are a little worker bee for the devil for the setup of the coming Antichrist system, would you be after Nephilim DNA today to try to bring back what was done then? Which I believe that's what the breeding program is with the UFO abductions or alien abductions. But there might be something that you need from the body of a Nephilim to do who knows what with. I don't know. Why is there an obsession with these things? Why would anybody want that? Why would you want the body of a dead person or a dead giant if you are the government of a country? You're America. What would you want with that body? Unless you have a nefarious agenda and there's something something relevant about that body, something powerful, something whatever that you think is necessary to do what, I don't know, go along with your plans. Because DNA seems to be a big deal. I know Dr. Marzulli thinks that when Adam and Eve ate from the fruit on the tree, and then what happened? All of a sudden, they realized they were naked and they had shame and they went and covered themselves. He thinks a DNA change happened. Something changed when they did that. And so that's conjecture. But if you think about it, your identity is wrapped up in your DNA. And then what are we as humans? Made in the image of God. And then even when you think about the life of Jesus, he took on humanity. He was actually born of a woman. So he would have had a unique fingerprint, unique DNA. I mean, DNA is a big deal, seems like, in the spirit. So that makes us what we are. So if you have a nefarious satanic agenda, and if you're chasing after old Bible characters or figures from occult saturated cities, I just feel like there's some kind of end times Luciferian agenda behind that. There's for some reason you need it, whether you need it like actual DNA or it's something to learn from to try to replicate, that's possible. But it's also perhaps a point of contact with certain spirits. And again, demons don't just go away, which is why where you see the same behavior, the same spirits behind it. Someone cutting themselves in the Bible and then someone cutting themselves today, you've got the same spirit behind it. Jezebel spirit, alive and well. So that's that. That's a conspiracy theory, I believe. I think the Iraq war was not just about oil or anything like that, or shutting down Islamic terrorism. I think there was much more to it than that. Saddam Hussein was into some weird stuff. So good riddance that he's not around. But it's possible that everything he was into and was working on just got into more powerful hands. And so who knows if we'll see where that kind of stuff will lead to or not. It could be what CERN is doing. We don't really know. I feel like I did a whole lot of rambling for no reason. But I'm going to end part 2 because I told you this wouldn't be that long. I'm going to end part 2. I'll pop these up real quick and then we'll go into part 3, which will be the Bible. Much more biblical than this part was. Those are my platforms where you can find me. I will post, I'll post these videos to Substack and YouTube. When I'm done, I'll put audio only on Spotify. And they should auto post on X, Rumble, and YouTube. And then if you want to support Amber Alert Podcast, those are the ways that you can. Sorry, got distracted. Okay. I will be back It's 7:34. I'll come back at 7:45 and we will do part 3. We'll get into the Bible, which is more important than ever to be in the Bible in this day and age. More important than ever. So we'll get into it. All right. God bless you. I'll see you soon.